Hello, I am Dr. Lisa Gibbons from Curtin University in Western Australia. I teach archives and preservation to undergraduate and postgraduate students. In my research, I explore socio-technical issues, impacts and implications of acquisition and preservation of online content, and the role that archivists can do and might play in the transformation and formation of digital cultural heritage. In this presentation, I'm going to share with you some intriguing information about algorithms and machine learning I've been collecting over the last year or so that I might talk about the nature and purpose of web archiving and how it is possible to understand evidence of culture as it is being valued and formed over space-time. Originally, this presentation was designed in Pichakucha style, where 20 slides are shown for 20 seconds each. This presentation has 13 slides, with the last one being quite a lot longer than 20 seconds. This year, Professor Jeff Goodhill from the University of Queensland wrote about AlphaGo. AlphaGo is an AI program designed to learn to play the board game Go. AlphaGo learns via use of neural networks and extraction of key ideas. Now, you've probably heard about the algorithm created by Stanford researchers that predicts sexual orientation from photographs of a person's face. This is also generated with learning neural network technology. Yet, as Professor Jeff Goodhill mentioned about AlphaGo, there is no known way to interrogate the network to directly read out what these key ideas are that help the algorithm make decisions. Instead, they can only study its outputs and hope to learn from these. A couple of years ago, Vladan Jola and colleagues in Belgrade began investigating the inner workings of Facebook. This image is a flowchart that they created depicting how our interactions with Facebook creates data, which show how we, as Facebook users, are in fact doing unpaid work for Facebook so they can sell us stuff. We all know this, of course, but perhaps we think less about what this might mean in 20 or 150 years related to data privacy and surveillance. When you think about the data we give Facebook now is used to calculate our ethnic affinity, that's Facebook's term, sexual orientation, political affiliation, social class, travel schedules, and much more. In 2013, a community of scholars and activists gathered in the US to examine and discuss the social justice impact of algorithmic accountability. Their hashtag is up there on the screen, #ALGACC. They raised more questions than answers about the impact of data surveillance and our right to know what and how data collected about us is being used. UCLA Assistant Professor Sophia Noble writes about algorithms of oppression and how the data they use to learn reinforces existing structures of racism and sexism. Sophia talks about how a Google search she undertook on the search term black girls often suggested porn sites and unmoderated discussions about why black women are so sassy or why black women are so angry, presenting a disturbing portrait of black womanhood in modern society. Researchers at the Pew Research Center identified 7 main themes about the algorithmic era. As part of sharing these concerns, which list 4 on the page, they tell a story of how Microsoft engineers recently created a Twitter bot named Tay in an attempt to chat with millennials by responding to their prompts. But within hours, it was spouting racist, sexist, Holocaust-denying tweets based on algorithms that had it learning how to respond to others based on what was tweeted at it. This year, US Professor Ben Schneiderman proposed that there should be a regulatory body called a National Algorithms Safety Board, which would provide oversight for high-stakes algorithms. In Australia, there are at least 20 separate parts of law that allow the government to give computers the power to make decisions. Decisions that used to be made by a human and can have important consequences. These laws allow for computers to make decisions about social security, taxation, parental leave, superannuation, migration, biosecurity, and child support. In every case, some kind of algorithm may be used to make decisions, and yet we have no knowledge of how these work, or even where they exist. These are powerful and disturbing stories about the creation and use of data, the role the internet plays, and the shaping role that mathematics and computers are playing in our society. Researcher Kalev Litaru wrote an article for Forbes recently that starts with the paragraph you see on this screen. This was not his first dig at how poorly web archiving is conceptualized and constructed. He started in 2012 talking about the lack of documentation regarding even the most critical decisions like inclusion criteria, seed lists and third-party crawl donors, meaning that we have precious little insight into how these archives were and are constructed and what biases may be manifest through those myriad of decisions. This is not a new conversation for me either. But algorithms and the rate of change in our virtual spaces and technologies are raising the stakes. All this exploration of algorithms and the internet comes back to a question I've been raising for a decade now. What is evidence of culture? And in this question, what is the role of the archivist and the archives in the construction and dissemination of cultural heritage? If web archives are online cultural heritage, how is their construction being understood and documented? As Kalev points out, does the medium examined define the results? This raises the question of what web archives are actually evidence of. But ultimately, how is it that we can interrogate the notion of evidence of culture? I want to share with you a model I created from research on how to understand the complexity of evidence of culture in online spaces. This model is an attempt to make sense of how and why people interact with recorded information. The purposes, the values, and the nature of memory as it is created, shared, accessed, and managed over time in various and complex ways, including in response to technologies, other people and entities, and various mechanisms, systems, and tools that help to enable and empower, as well as disempower and make hidden. I want to share with you the three important areas it represents. Firstly, memory and evidence, as processes that are separate but intrinsically linked. The process of memory making has a relationship to multiple systems, mechanisms and perspectives involved in establishing evidence. Secondly, how people create is linked to how they see and identify themselves, what they're interested in, as well as what values they perceive according to various community cultures. Narrative is vital to understanding this, as it is a tool that can construct and communicate multiple and simultaneous realities, identify and make sense of the self within groups, community and society, and is imbued with power of dominant, counter and competing narratives, and as a mechanism for memory making and knowledge preservation. Thirdly, interaction occurs in conjunction with an understanding of action at various levels, as well as in relation to how people use, value and experience technologies, including what technologies afford or do not allow to help people achieve their goals in creating and sharing something of who they are. This model shows that all these points of view exist simultaneously and in multiples. How an individual understands their identity and work is not necessarily how it is seen by someone else. So when the archivist creates in the created dimension by documenting the world, they should be taking into account the varied, diverse and potentially incommensurable complexities that make up this map of how we understand cultural heritage as evidence of culture. If we see algorithms as part of a continuum of mediated memories, where and how do they fit in? Whose narratives are being told, and what do we need to know about mandates to understand their contexts as memory? I don't have the answers today, but this is something I'm very keen to explore in more depth. But what my research into algorithms is beginning to reveal is the deep, complex relationship and nature we have with data and machines. Archivists, and I count myself as one, need to consider what this means as to how we understand culture as evidence and heritage as it's being formed. Archivists also need to understand and challenge their role in the system so that they may empower, discover, and transform to meet multiple needs over time. Flexibility, adaptability, and a need to understand what is being valued and who by as it is being created is essential to any transformation. This includes transformation within ourselves as professionals, as well as transformation of what role archives as constructions of evidence play in society.